All over the Eastern Mediterranean, people are in love with shawarma. Shawarma is essentially a grilled or roasted meat that's served on a flatbread with various condiments. And today in this video, I'm going to show you how to make a shawarma at home. We're going to braise some lamb and serve it with a really rich, creamy tahini sauce and some lightly pickled cabbage. So we're going to make yufka. Yufka is a Turkish flatbread, and it's made with just 4 ingredients. It's very simple, very similar to tortilla. Flour, water, oil, and salt. And we start with our flour in a mixing bowl. We add salt, and we're just going to mix that in a little bit. We're going to make a well in the bottom, and we're going to add our water and our oil. And we're going to just start mixing it until we get a wet, sticky dough. It looks about just like this. Perfect. And then we're going to take it out of this bowl and knead it a little bit on our board until it becomes a little bit smooth before it rests. And if it starts sticking to your board a little bit, just use a little more flour. Okay, and once the dough is nice and smooth and not, can be a little sticky, but not sticking to your board anymore, it just gets placed back in the bowl. So you want to just lightly oil the top of it using any sort of leftover oil. You just need a tiny bit. Sprinkle that over and then just kind of rub it around the top of the dough. And we're going to cover this with plastic wrap and let it rest for about 4 hours. So our yufka has had some time to rest. And you've got a really nice, soft, pliable dough now. And we're just going to cut it into 6 pieces. So we'll divide it in half first and roll it out into a thinner shape so then we can cut it into 6 equal balls of dough. And then we want to take each ball of dough and just roll it into a little round, and these rest after they're rolled into a little round. And if it's sticky, just use a tiny bit of flour to help you. So then once you have 6 balls, you want to let them rest for about a half an hour more so that you relax the gluten. So if you want to clear them off your counter, you can put them on something and just cover them with a towel, or you can just place the towel right over them on the counter and let them rest. So we're ready to roll out the yufka. We've got a little bit of flour. I'm going to lightly flour our surface. It's better to add just a little and be able to add a little more as you need it versus having too much flour. You just basically want it not to stick to your surface. And so what I find helpful is to dimple it a little bit, flatten it out, put a little bit of flour on my rolling pin. And this is a nice rolling pin because it's not too heavy. And yufka, when it's made, is usually made with a really tiny rolling pin, really skinny one, so that you can work with it very fast and roll it very thin. And you're just going to roll it out as thin as you possibly can. And don't worry about the shape. If it's not perfectly round, it doesn't make any difference at all because you're just going to roll these up. So if you find that your dough is snapping back on you, it means that it hasn't rested long enough. So you want to just give it a few more minutes, 10, 15, 20 more minutes. But basically when you're rolling it out, you want it to be thin and not being shrunk as it continues to roll. It shouldn't be difficult. So once we've got them rolled out, we can stack them between parchment paper so that they won't stick to each other. And if you have tons of flour, you want to shake it off a little bit so that it's not completely covered in flour. But you want it not to be sticky at this point when you put it between parchment paper. So we're just going to continue to roll each little ball into a thin, roughly 9-inch round, trying to get it as thin as possible. So now we can cook off the yufka, and you want to have a hot cast iron pan. Just got this warming up on medium heat. And then if you put your hand over it, you can tell it's hot enough just by feeling the temperature in the pan. You just want to make sure that the dough doesn't stick to it when you're cooking it. So you just take a little paper towel and just rub the pan with some of the oil so that it's really just lightly coated. And then we can just take the yufka and drop it right in. And not to worry, if anything folds over, you can just unfold it real quickly, but even if there's a little edge that's not perfect, it doesn't matter because it will be all rolled up eventually. This takes a couple minutes on one side. So what we're looking for is some little air bubbles to form. They will form as the dough starts cooking all the way through. You can just pat those bubbles down a little bit, but when you see those, you're ready to turn it. And you'll see you've got just gentle golden brown spots, which is what we're looking for. And we're just going to give it about a minute on the other side too to cook through, but not real crispy. And you'll see those air bubbles form again. You just keep patting them down. They eventually just sink once the dough rests anyway, so it's nothing to worry about. It just sort of gives you a clue as to when it's time to turn it. So basically that's it. It's about 2 minutes on one side, another minute on the other side. And we just repeat the process with the dough until they're all cooked. The idea is to have it really soft and pliable so you can roll it around your sandwich and then crisp it up again. So we're going to start by cooking the lamb. Traditionally, a lamb shawarma is done vertically, so it's layers of lamb that's put on a spit vertically, and then it turns slowly around a fire. And then the lamb is shaved off onto the piece of flatbread so that all the juices collect in the bread before it's rolled up into a shawarma. But since vertical spits aren't really common in everybody's house, we're going to do a version that's braised really slowly in the oven using some shoulder chops. And shoulder chops are really nice because they're marbled with a little bit of fat, and as they cook very slowly, everything just sort of melts away and you're left with some nice chunks of lamb and some beautiful juices that you can roll into the flatbread. So we're going to start by browning the lamb, and we're going to add a little oil to a hot pan and place the chops 2 at a time, whatever fits in your pan. So this will take about 2 to 3 minutes on each side on medium-high heat. So now we're going to turn the chops and brown the other side. And we're looking for this nice golden brown color here. Okay, so now we're just going to take the lamb chops out of the pan and put them into a roasting pan. And repeat the same process with the other 2 chops. So we're going to take the chops and season them now with some salt and pepper. So then we're just going to pull the lamb chops out of the pan again and arrange them in the baking dish so that they fit nice and snug. And season them again. So now we're going to try to get all this beautiful caramel off the bottom of the pan with a little bit of wine. So we're just going to simmer this until the sugars that are stuck to the bottom of the pan start to come up. And while that's simmering, we'll add our spices and our aromatics. So we'll add cumin, which is a really earthy, delicious spice, which goes on a lot of different things in the Middle East. And we'll add our garlic. Maybe all the cumin as evenly as possible, sprinkle it around the pan. This is all going to go in the oven and braise for a little while. So everything just sort of melts together during that process. And then we'll add our vegetables. Aromatic vegetables like onions and carrots are perfect. And we just scatter those throughout, tucking in wherever we can. So if the juices stick to the bottom of the pan, you could just use a wooden spatula like this to get them off and get them unstuck. So everything's unstuck in the pan now. We've got a nice caramelized juice, and we're just going to pour it over the lamb. The juices should come about halfway up. And if they don't, you can just add a little bit more wine or a little more water. And we're going to take a couple pieces of foil and cover the top so that there's a nice heavy top on it, or a lid. And they go right into the oven. The lamb is out of the oven, very tender. Just by pressing it with your finger, it should just feel like it's going to fall apart. And we just want to strain the juices out of them. And basically, we're going to chill this and skim it and make the sauce from these juices. And then we're going to tent the lamb with foil just to keep it warm. Okay, so now we're going to take our braising juices and start making our sauce for the lamb. So we take our juices and pour them right into the pan. We're going to turn this up a little bit and cook them down and sort of concentrate all the juices until we get something that's reduced by 1/2 and is a little bit thicker and more concentrated. And while this is reducing down, we're going to take our lamb and turn it into little chunks of lamb that are going to be glazed in the sauce when it's finished. And if the meat's really hot, you can just use a couple forks and just pull the meat apart just like so. But for me, it's a little easier to work with my fingers, so I just pull everything off and separate the little chunks and discard the bone and any fat that's left. So now we're ready to finish our sauce. Our sauce is thickened a little bit and concentrated. It's reduced down. You can see it kind of changed a little darker in color as well. So we're just going to add a few ingredients, a little butter. And this just kind of glazes up the juices. Tiny bit of lemon juice. And pomegranate molasses, which is an amazing condiment to have in your pantry. This is very typical of a Middle Eastern pantry in that it brings a lively, tart, acidic taste to something, especially something really rich like lamb that's been braised for a long time. It really cuts through the richness. It's essentially reduced concentrate of pomegranate juice. It's made from a sour pomegranate where the fruit is juiced, and then it's reduced in half until it becomes really thick and syrupy like this. And you can see what it does to the color of the juices as well. So now we're ready to add our lamb to our sauce. So we're just going to add it, simmer it for a minute or so until it just kind of coats the pieces of lamb. So we're just going to taste it, check it for seasoning. It's perfect. It's delicious. Maybe a tiny bit more salt. And that's it. We've got our filling for our shawarma. So now for the best part, we get to assemble the shawarma. And we take some of the yufka that's been lightly warmed in a cast iron pan. And we have a really simple tahini sauce that's just garlic, a little lemon, yogurt, tahini, and a lightly pickled cabbage, which gives it a little bit of crunch, a little bit of tanginess, and our braised lamb. So we start with the braised lamb, and we just add about 1 inch on one side, just so you've got some room to roll and wrap. But you want a little bit of the juices because some of that juice is going to catch in the bread. And then a little bit of cabbage. The nicest part about the shawarma is that you don't want to stuff it like a burrito. You want a nice even layer of everything so that there's not a ton of filling in a little bread or a ton of bread in a little filling. It's all about the proportion really in this. And then you're just going to frost it with this tahini sauce. And then you want to just take a little turn and sort of squeeze and tuck as you roll. You get a little tahini frosting on your fingers as you go, but this sort of helps hold the whole shawarma together. And you just repeat with all of them until all 6 of the sandwiches are assembled. Okay, so now when you're ready to serve them, you just take your same cast iron pan that you made the yufka in and just give them a little crisp. Make sure you put them down on the seam side so that this side, it actually kind of seals it when it crisps it up. And you can put as many that fit into the pan as you want, or as many as you want to serve right away. And we're just going to lightly crisp them, toast them really, just to warm them through and get one side a little crunchy. So basically you'll have a really crisp bottom and a really soft top. So it's kind of like adding another texture to the sandwich, which makes it even better. So we're going to just check, make sure one side's a little crispy and it feels hot. And this is the best part. We get to try it now. Cut it in half. And you can see the beautiful layers of lamb and tahini and cabbage. And if you have a little extra juice left, it's a great sauce to just dip a little corner. Don't throw it away. Serve it with this shawarma. Mmm. Delicious. The tanginess from the pomegranate molasses really jumps right out. It's fantastic.